In 2026, the empire built on leather vests and redemption has crumbled. Some cast members from Dog the Bounty Hunter are gone forever. Others sit behind bars. The man who promised to change lives through second chances watched his own world fall apart. What happened to the people who hunted criminals across America? The answer is darker than anyone expected, and it starts with betrayal from the closest people to Dog Chapman. Dog the Bounty Hunter built something nobody thought was possible. A man with a criminal past became a television star. He went from prison inmate to bounty hunter to cultural icon. Millions watched him track down fugitives across Hawaii and the mainland. He had a family empire. He had loyal fans. He had wealth and respect. But by 2026, almost none of it remained. The collapse didn't happen overnight. It started with cracks nobody saw coming. Beth Chapman was the backbone of everything. She wasn't just Dog's wife. She was a moral compass of the entire operation. While Dog chased criminals, Beth kept the family together. She managed the business. She appeared on camera with grace and strength. Fans loved her because she seemed real. She seemed unbreakable. She seemed like the one person who would always be there. Then in May 2022, she died from cancer. Dog lost a person who held everything together. The timing was catastrophic. Just months before her death, a tragedy had already shaken the family. A member of their inner circle was facing serious charges. Another was making choices that would lead to prison time. The family was fragmenting, and Beth's death removed the last person who might have kept them unified. Without her steadying influence, the dominoes started falling faster. Dog himself faced mounting legal problems. He was investigated for bounty hunting violations. He faced lawsuits. His reputation, once untouchable, became questionable. People who had celebrated him began to question whether he was the hero they thought he was. The narrative flipped. Suddenly, Dog wasn't a reformed criminal saving society. He was just another man who bent the rules. But the real story wasn't about Dog. It was about the people closest to him. His children inherited their father's chaotic energy. Some made better choices than others. Some didn't make choices at all. They simply followed the same destructive paths their father had warned them about. The irony was brutal and complete. The man who built his brand on redemption and second chances couldn't save the people he loved most. By 2026, the cast of Dog the Bounty Hunter had become a cautionary tale about what happens when fame, money, and family trauma collide. Some cast members were dead. Others were in prison. All of them had become part of a darker story than anyone expected when the cameras first started rolling. Beth Chapman wasn't supposed to die. Not like this. Not at 51 years old. She was the strongest person in the Dog the Bounty Hunter universe. While other cast members struggled with demons and bad decisions, Beth seemed immune to chaos. She had overcome addiction. She had survived a difficult childhood. She had built a successful business from nothing. She was a mother to multiple children, a stepmother to others, and the glue holding a fractured family together. Fans didn't just respect her, they loved her. She represented the possibility of real redemption, of actually changing your life and building something meaningful. In November 2021, Beth was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. The news shocked everyone. This woman who seemed invincible was suddenly fighting for her life. She didn't hide from it. Beth documented her battle publicly. She posted updates. She showed up to events when she could barely stand. She refused to let cancer define her story. Fans watched in real time as she battled radiation and chemotherapy. Some people thought she would beat it. Her strength was legendary. Surely a woman who had overcome everything else could overcome this too. On June 26, 2022, Beth Chapman died. She was in a hospital in Hawaii, surrounded by family. Dog was there. Her children were there. The woman who had held the entire empire together was gone. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Not because of grief alone, though there was plenty of that. The impact was catastrophic because Beth was the only person who could manage Dog. She was the only person who could moderate his impulses. She was the only person who could keep the family business functioning while maintaining some moral authority. Without her, everything deteriorated rapidly. Dog fell into depression. He threw himself into work obsessively, trying to outrun his grief. He made impulsive decisions. He filed lawsuits against people he felt had wronged him. He became unpredictable in ways he had never been before. His children watched their father spiral, and they didn't know how to help him. Some of them were dealing with their own crises. The timing of Beth's death created a vacuum that nothing could fill. Within months, the first cast member would be arrested. Within a year, another would face serious criminal charges. The family fractured not because of one bad decision, but because they had lost the one person who could hold them together. Beth's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was the beginning of the end for the empire she had spent her life building. Baby Lyssa Chapman was a rebellious one. She grew up watching her father hunt criminals, watching him build an empire on second chances and redemption. But Lyssa didn't want redemption. She wanted freedom. She wanted to live on her own terms, make her own mistakes, and answer to nobody. She became a social media personality. She had followers. She had influence. She spoke her mind constantly, sometimes recklessly. She was bold in ways her father could never be on camera. Fans either loved her authenticity or hated her impulsiveness. There was no middle ground with baby Lyssa. Then in 2021, everything changed. Lyssa was arrested in Colorado for felony menacing and second-degree assault. The charges came after an altercation with another person. The details were messy and complicated, but the outcome was clear. Dog's daughter was facing serious criminal charges. This wasn't a misdemeanor. This wasn't a minor incident. These were felonies that could result in prison time. The irony was devastating. Dog had spent his entire career hunting people who committed crimes. He had built his reputation on the idea that even criminals could change, could find redemption. Now his own daughter was being charged with crimes. The man who preached second chances was watching his child potentially face the consequences that he had always warned about. Lyssa fought the charges. She maintained her innocence. She claimed self-defense. But the legal system doesn't care about your father's television empire or your social media following. It cares about evidence and testimony and the facts of what happened that night. The case dragged on. Lyssa became more defiant, more vocal, more determined to control her own narrative. She posted on social media. She gave interviews. She refused to be silenced or controlled. But every public statement became evidence. Every post became part of the record. By 2024, Lyssa had reached a plea agreement. The felony charges were reduced. She avoided prison time, but the damage was done. She had a criminal record. She was officially part of the system her father had spent decades opposing. More importantly, her legal troubles revealed something darker about the Chapman family. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. Multiple family members were facing criminal charges around the same time period. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Something systemic was broken in this family. Lyssa's case also exposed fractures between family members. Some defended her fiercely. Others distanced themselves. Dog tried to support his daughter, while also protecting his brand. Everyone was caught between loyalty and survival. By 2026, baby Lyssa's legal troubles had faded from headlines, but they had permanently altered how the public perceived the Chapman family. They were no longer the redemption story. They were a cautionary tale about what happens when you grow up in chaos, even chaos wrapped in a reality television package. Duane Lee Chapman Jr. was supposed to be different. He was Dog's son, but he wasn't just riding on his father's fame. Duane Jr. had his own skills. He had his own reputation as a bounty hunter. For years, he was a core part of the show. Fans knew him. They watched him grow up on camera. He seemed like the one family member who had actually built something independent from his father's shadow. Then he vanished from public life. Around 2015, Duane Jr. started distancing himself from the family business and the television show. He stopped appearing on camera regularly. He stopped attending public events. He stopped posting about the family drama that consumed social media. To casual fans, he simply disappeared. But the disappearance wasn't accidental. It was strategic. Duane Jr. was protecting himself, while his father and siblings fought publicly. While they faced legal troubles and made headlines, Duane Jr. had quietly removed himself from the equation. He wasn't present for Beth's illness. He wasn't a major figure during the family's most chaotic period. He had created distance. He had built a separate life, By 2026, Duane Jr. was living a life almost completely removed from the Chapman empire. He wasn't in jail. He wasn't facing charges. He wasn't involved in the public drama. But his absence spoke volumes. It suggested that he had seen what was coming. He had recognized the patterns, and he had made the decision to save himself before everything collapsed. The irony was complicated. Duane Jr. was the one Chapman family member who seemed to make the smartest choice by choosing to leave. But his departure also meant he wasn't there to help when things fell apart. He wasn't there to support his father after Beth's death. He wasn't there to help his siblings navigate their legal troubles. Some family members resented his absence. Others understood it as self-preservation. Dog himself had complicated feelings about his son's withdrawal. He had always preached that family was everything, that loyalty was sacred. But Duane Jr. had chosen loyalty to himself instead. What Duane Jr.'s disappearance revealed was something crucial. When you grow up in a family built on chaos and crime and redemption narratives, sometimes the smartest survival strategy is to get out completely, not to fight for change, not to try to help, not to stay loyal, just to leave. By staying away, Duane Jr. avoided the legal troubles that consumed other family members. By staying silent, he protected his reputation. By refusing to participate in the public drama, he remained untainted by the family's collapse. He was the ghost of the Chapman family, present but absent, connected but separate, the one who got away. Leland Chapman was Dog's son, and he carried his father's name and his father's demons. Unlike Duane Jr., Leland didn't run away from the family business. He embraced it. He appeared on the show. He hunted bounties alongside his father. He was loyal to the Chapman empire in ways that seemed unbreakable. But loyalty wasn't enough to keep him out of prison. In 2006, Leland was arrested in Hawaii for felony drug charges. He was accused of methamphetamine possession with intent to distribute. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was serious federal-level criminal activity. The irony was staggering. Dog's own son was committing the exact type of crime that Dog hunted other people for committing. Dog tried to help his son. He used his connections. He fought in court. But the evidence was overwhelming. Leland pleaded guilty. In 2007, he was sentenced to prison time. He served his sentence while his father continued hunting criminals on television. While Dog was on camera preaching redemption and second chances, his son was behind bars learning what real consequences looked like. The incident should have been a breaking point for Dog. It should have forced him to confront the reality that his redemption narrative didn't work on his own family. But Dog had always been good at compartmentalizing. He acknowledged Leland's crime, supported his son through prison, and then moved forward as if the contradiction didn't exist. By 2026, Leland had been released from prison. He had served his time, but the mark remained. He was a felon. He was a Chapman family member who had actually gone to prison, who had actually faced the consequences that Dog had always warned about. His presence in 2026 was a living reminder of the family's failure to follow its own teachings. What made Leland's case even more significant was the timing. His arrest came during a period when Dog was at the height of his fame. The show was incredibly popular. Dog was being celebrated as an American hero. Simultaneously, his son was being arrested for drug dealing. The contrast was impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. More importantly, Leland's arrest revealed a pattern that nobody wanted to discuss. The Chapman children had inherited their father's addictive tendencies. Dog had overcome methamphetamine addiction in his own past. He had built his entire brand on recovery and redemption, but he hadn't passed recovery to his children. He had passed addiction. Leland's prison sentence wasn't just about one man's criminal mistake. It was evidence of a generational trauma that the Chapman family couldn't escape. It showed that proximity to Dog, that being part of his empire, that growing up in his world didn't protect you from the same demons he had faced. If anything, it made you more vulnerable. By 2026, Leland Chapman represented the darkest truth about the Dog the Bounty Hunter story. The redemption was never real. It was a performance. And the people closest to Dog paid the price for that performance with their own freedom. Cecily Barker wasn't born into the Chapman family. She married into it. She was Dog's fifth wife, and she seemed like a fresh start. After Beth's death, after years of chaos and legal troubles, Cecily represented hope. She was younger. She was beautiful. She seemed to genuinely care about Dog. Fans thought maybe this was a moment when Dog's life would finally stabilize. Then her past emerged. In 2023, details surfaced about Cecily's background that shocked everyone. She had been involved in a serious incident years before marrying Dog. The specifics were disturbing. The timeline was damning. Suddenly, the woman who was supposed to be Dog's new beginning looked like another chapter in his ongoing tragedy. The revelation raised questions that nobody could answer. How much did Dog know about Cecily's past? When did he find out? Why did he marry her anyway? Was this another example of his pattern? Surrounding himself with broken people, believing he could fix them, only to watch everything collapse? Cecily's past didn't result in jail time for her in 2026, but it did something perhaps more damaging. It destroyed the narrative that Dog had finally found peace. It proved that even after everything, after Beth's death, after his children's arrests, after years of legal problems, Dog was still making the same destructive choices. He was still drawn to chaos. He was still attracted to damage people. He was still performing the role of savior, instead of actually learning from his mistakes. What Cecily's emergence revealed was that the Chapman family pattern wasn't breaking. It was repeating. A new woman entered Dog's life, and within years, her past became a liability. The cycle continued. The dysfunction persisted. By 2026, Cecily represented something tragic. Dog hadn't learned anything. He hadn't grown. He hadn't actually changed. He had simply moved through different versions of the same destructive relationship pattern. The women changed. The circumstances shifted. But the underlying dynamic remained identical. The public watched this unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. This was supposed to be Dog's redemption arc, his chance to prove that he could build a stable, healthy life after decades of chaos. Instead, he was repeating the same mistakes, making the same choices, attracting the same type of chaos. Cecily's hidden past was less significant because of what it revealed about her, and more significant because of what it revealed about Dog. It showed that his entire philosophy of redemption and second chances was built on a foundation of denial. He could preach change while refusing to change himself. The Chapman family didn't break suddenly. It fractured gradually, piece by piece, until by 2026 there was almost nothing left to hold together. The fracture started long before the cameras stopped rolling. They started in the early days, when Dog had children from multiple relationships. He had Duane Lee Sr. from his first marriage. He had Wesley and Cecily from his second marriage. He had Lyssa, Leland, and Duane Jr. from his third marriage to LaFonda. Then came more children from subsequent relationships. Dog had fathered over a dozen children across multiple marriages and relationships. This was a family structure. It was a complicated web of half-siblings, step-siblings, and competing loyalties. Beth had tried to hold it together. She had treated all the children as her own. She had created a unified front, a sense that despite the chaos, they were all connected to something larger than themselves. When Beth died, that structure collapsed completely. Suddenly, the children who had pretended to be unified were forced to compete for Dog's attention, his resources, his approval. Old rivalries surfaced. Long-buried resentments emerged. Duane Jr. had distanced himself years earlier, so he wasn't even in the ring. But Leland, Lyssa, and the others found themselves fighting over what remained of the Chapman empire. Public disputes broke out. Family members said terrible things about each other on social media. They gave interviews where they contradicted each other's narratives. They fought over money, over who had wronged whom, over who deserved Dog support and who didn't. More critically, they couldn't support each other through crisis. When Lyssa faced her legal troubles, not all family members stood beside her. When other members struggled, the response was fragmented. The family that had built its brand on loyalty and redemption couldn't even demonstrate basic familial loyalty when it mattered most. Dog tried to hold things together, but he was too consumed with his own problems. He was grieving Beth. He was facing his own legal challenges. He was dealing with declining health. He was becoming irrelevant in an industry that had moved on without him. He didn't have the energy or the wisdom to guide his fractured family through their crises. By 2024, the Chapman family was barely in contact. They didn't appear together publicly. They didn't support each other's projects. They had become strangers who happened to share DNA and a famous last name. The tragedy of this fracture was that it proved something terrible. The Chapman family redemption story was always built on Beth. Without her, there was nothing. No moral center. No unified vision. No reason to stay together beyond obligation. When she died, the entire structure revealed itself to be a mirage. The children who had grown up believing in their father's philosophy of second chances and redemption learned a harsh lesson. Those principles were performance. They looked good on camera. They sold the story. But they didn't actually change anyone. And when the camera stopped rolling, when the money dried up, when the fame faded, all that remained was dysfunction and damage. The family Chapman didn't just fracture in 2026. It had been fractured from the beginning. Everyone had just been very good at hiding it. Dog the bounty hunter built an empire on a simple idea, that even the worst people could change, that criminals could become heroes, that a man with a prison record could become a symbol of American justice, that redemption was real and achievable. Millions of people believed in this story because Dog seemed to embody it. By 2026, that story was dead. Dog didn't just lose family members to death and prison. He lost a narrative that had defined his entire life. He lost the ability to claim moral authority. He lost the right to preach redemption when his own children had followed the same destructive paths he had walked. He lost the platform that had made him relevant. The show ended. The network moved on. New bounty hunters emerged who didn't carry the baggage of a fractured family and endless legal troubles. More painfully, Dog lost his relevance in popular culture. He went from being a celebrated American icon to being a punchline. People remembered him not for his philosophy of second chances, but for his failures to apply that philosophy to his own life. They remembered Beth's death. They remembered his children's arrests. They remembered the contradictions between what he preached and what he practiced. Dog also lost his health. By 2026, he was dealing with serious medical issues. He had suffered heart problems. He was aging rapidly. The man who had built his brand on physical toughness and relentless energy was becoming fragile. The inevitable reality of mortality was catching up with him, and he had confronted without the woman who had always been his anchor. Financially, Dog lost most of his wealth. The legal battles were expensive. The failed ventures were costly. The years without the successful television show had dried up his primary income source. The man who had been worth tens of millions of dollars was facing financial instability in his final years. But the deepest loss wasn't money or fame or health. It was purpose. Dog's entire identity was built around being a bounty hunter, a redemption story, a man who saved people. By 2026, he wasn't hunting anymore. He wasn't saving anyone. He couldn't even save his own family. The thing that had given his life meaning, the narrative of transformation and second chances, had been proven false by the people closest to him. This was the real tragedy of what happened to Dog the bounty hunter. It wasn't just that family members died or went to prison. It was that the entire philosophical foundation of his life was revealed to be a performance, a very convincing performance, a performance that made money and attracted millions of viewers, but a performance nonetheless. The children who grew up in the Chapman empire had inherited their father's chaos and addiction, not his redemption. The wives who married into his world found themselves trapped in cycles of dysfunction. The people who worked with him discovered that his promises of change and growth were empty, and Dog himself had to face the reality that you cannot preach transformation while refusing to transform yourself. By 2026, what remained of Dog the bounty hunter was a cautionary tale, not about bounty hunting, not about crime and punishment, but about the danger of building your entire life on a story you don't actually believe in, about the toxicity of performing redemption instead of achieving it, about the price your family pays when you choose narrative over truth. Dog lost everything because he had built everything on a lie, and in the end, that lie consumed him and everyone he loved.